Hello.
We got you. And then city staff, Martin. Where'd Carlton go? Carlton's here. He's got the rest.
He's downstairs.
Okay, later, people.
Don't get me to guess.
Chris coming. Okay, and then Councilmember.
Chris is in Super High. Here.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for joining us. Moving on to preliminary general business and announcements. See if members of the PAC, staff, or council have any announcements about things that are not on the agenda. Hearing none, move on to, hey, Sean, we just started like 30 seconds ago.
Right on. Hi, guys.
Move on to public comment. Martin, did you hear about any public comment?
I did not.
None in the room? All right. Get you there, John, 6 o'clock. Sailing through the agenda. Approval of minutes. One set of minutes.
One set of minutes.
Was
yes.
set out. See, I paid attention, Martin. One set of minutes was sent out. I should remember which days that was, but.
January.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Did folks have a chance to review the January minutes?
I did.
And if so, anyone care to make a motion to approve?
I'll motion to approve.
Thanks, sir.
Second.
Couple of seconds. All in favor of approving our January minutes, please say aye. Aye.
Hi.
Any opposed? Nope. All right. Moving right on into new business and micro-mobility share. All right, do you want to introduce it or do you want to just kick it over to our guests?
Just kick it over to our guests.
All right.
Okay,
Please.
my name is Kim Austin and I'm the TDM planner with MetroPlan. And my partner today in this presentation.
I'm Lorena and I'm the Associate Transit Planner at Mountain Line. So I'll be helping out to discuss mobility share today. I have the honor to work with these guys and get my foot in the door with active transportation. So really looking forward to that today.
And we also have Jamie Larson. Go ahead, you wanna?
Yeah, I'm working Office of Sustainability, AmeriCorps Vista as Housing and Transportation.
So you have all the people today. Okay. How do we want to, do you want me, how do we do
This is the last time. Are you in the, can you share, are you in the meeting? Can you share?
Yes. Are you in it? Okay, I can do it. I can do it.
Because then we're gonna have to reduce this, right?
Okay, hang on. I'm just gonna get to where we do it. Like it's supposed to look. Okay. All right. So let's find the sharing button. Oh, hey, we did it. I don't know. Thank you, Martin. All right, so the three of us or two of us are here to present micromobility share per direction from City Council after a presentation in February on the 11th. And Council has given us direction to continue the conversation of micromobility share to all the different commissions and stakeholders. And so we're making our rounds. All right. Okay. So the agenda is to just touch on what is micromobility share, why micromobility share, and some research and how it could look in Flagstaff. So, as I said earlier, this discussion is continuing a pre-pandemic conversation on micromobility share in Flagstaff. There's a timeline of just what micromobility share, how it's looked in the United States and in North America, actually. And so, start around 2008. The things I'd like to point out is in 2018, we had a pilot with Spin. We will explain further on that later in the presentation. But in 2019, the city of Flagstaff entered into a solicitation and a contract with Gotcha. And that was for a bike share program. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic and supply chains, that contract ended up being canceled. And so we want to discuss if Pedestrian Advisory Committee would like to see a micro share program because vendors are seeking to come here. And so the current code, our Flagstaff code states that companies can obtain a permit, but there's no permit process. So we're sort of limiting anyone to coming to Flagstaff at this point. So we sort of need to resolve this either way. Should I just keep going? If anyone has questions, just holler, I guess, at me. All right, so just some basics of micromobility share. So micromobility, I'm referring to low occupancy vehicles. Oftentimes they're electric, and e-scooters, e-bikes, one wheels, electric skateboards, all of those devices are considered micromobility. As for a shared program, right, these devices will be shared and publicly available. They are intended for short-term use, and they will be operated in the right-of-way and public spaces. And these devices are meant to be sort of to and from a destination, like a transit or a quick downtown, and in the hopes of not getting in your car and driving. So reducing those EMTs. All right. So a micromobility share program does support all of the topics that you see. We see a decreased congestion in traffic and greenhouse gas emissions, increased physical activity of the users. It promotes active transportation. They're affordable. The general price of owning a small vehicle would be around $12,000, and a micromobility share membership is in the range of $100 to $300 a month. So they're affordable. You can also have discounted memberships for low-income individuals. As far as parking, it decreases the need for traditional parking spaces. We will touch on that later on as well. It's an environmentally fun way to explore a town. And then as far as tourism, local businesses can have partnerships with these vendors and companies to offer discounts. And so it's definitely a way to promote shopping and partnerships within the community. And then I have a quote from Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. Transportation is one of the most underappreciated but significant determinants of health and well-being. And a micromobility share program supports transportation and health. All right. A share program is also supported in the documents, the Active Transportation Master Plan, Metro Plan Stride Forward, the Regional Transportation Master Plan, and the Carbon Neutrality Plan. And actually the Carbon Neutrality Plan specifically mentions launching a micromobility share program within the plan. And these all have been adopted. These are planning documents that have been adopted through the city. All right. This is a map produced by Mountain Line, and it shows the support a micromobility share program can have on transit. Those brown areas that you see are areas that they're areas that have seen an increased service request from Mountain Line, but the area is not conducive to transit. And so those brown areas are the specific areas where a shared micromobility program could support transit. In the feasibility, so I think in your packet, you were given a feasibility study link, no, yes?
Yes.
Okay, so, that was a partnership between Metroplan and, Mountain Line. And, we did do some peer research, so just a couple of highlights on that. Generally, all the peer research we did, there's different program models for different, shared micromobility. And generally what used to happen, in the early 2000s is the city, would purchase the devices and run a program. And that has evolved, to now there are third-party vendors that actually run. And so, what happens is, you enter a contract or a permit process or some way, and we'll get into the logistics of that later, but these vendors are the ones that run the program. And there are some commonalities where the cities can receive some financial benefit. And I will mention that e-scooters are generally the primary device offered. So I don't want to make sure. Yeah. All right. So there we go. Where'd it go? Those are the peer cities that are listed, and a map showing micromobility share systems in North America. And there are 371 US cities on that map. And specifically in Arizona, the cities that have these shared programs are Yuma, Scottsdale, Phoenix, Tucson, Tempe, Mesa, and Gilbert. So Arizona definitely has a lot of these programs. All right. The image on the left shows peer cities with active devices that are available at one time. And if you notice, the cities that are similar in population to ours, the devices at one time are around the 200s to 250. So it's not like we're gonna have 1,000 devices around town if you want to bring micromobility share. It's more of the 200. So I just wanted to make sure we knew that. On the right is just showing the growth in bike share at dockless and bike share and e-scooter systems. And then just to highlight, at the end of last year, with these programs, like I said, the majority, 75% were e-scooters and only 25% were e-bikes. Okay. All right. And continuing our research, like I said, the programs differ between cities, but generally there is some city investment, and that is a commonality as well. So there is some sort of financial agreement. A lot of cities are paid through fees that are built into these contracts or these vendors. And there really is some city time that needs to be devoted to this program. But a lot of programs, the cities did not vest actual money. You know what I mean? They entered a contract, the vendor ran the program, but you can build in these this monetary into, you know, some of the user and the rider fees. So, but they're all different. So kind of coming back to the SPIN program in 2018, Flagstaff did have a pilot, and I don't know if anyone remembers those orange bikes. Everyone's like, yeah, do you remember those? Okay, so that was the SPIN pilot, and this is just a snapshot of this program. And there were just under 3,000 total trips taken, most of them between 7 p.m. and 3 a.m. The average trip was less than a mile. It was a success. 6 months, almost 3,000 trips. Definitely, it shows that there's a need. So we just wanted to highlight that. All right.
Also wanted to add on that last slide that where the usage was most robust does align with the map you provided for Mountain Line, where the connectivity issues with fixed route
Yep.
presents a challenge.
Mhm.
So I think that's something that this captured as well.
Right. Take it away, Lorena.
So managing micromobility share risks, with the good news also comes
Oh, sorry.
the need to mitigate and eliminate some of
There.
those.
Oh. Well, I don't know what happened to
You're
the
fine.
slides. Okay, keep going. Go back.
I think you went a little bit. Yep.
Okay, I'm
They're all in
sorry.
a different order. That's okay. So there are many benefits and there are also risks to manage. Metro Plan and Mountain Line recommend that partners explore establishing micromobility share programs and guidelines using the best practices and risk mitigation tools mentioned. These strategies are going to mostly highlight the high risk and how to manage and eliminate those risks. But we're not suggesting that all these techniques be implemented. The first category would be personal injury, risk to the human body, and then also risk for different areas in town where there might be a different jurisdiction and liability. And so really making sure that we have regular maintenance on this equipment, have it be maintained in a timely fashion, and have agreements with different local bike shops to provide helmet rentals, and also emphasize that, you know, people are assuming a risk by using these micromobility devices. Device parking. So in past micromobility programs, there have been issues where you might visually see sidewalks that are blocked. There might be issues presenting to our ADA community where folks need access to the sidewalk. And we certainly want to make sure that there is strategy and implementation as to where these devices will be parked. We would require a lot of this to be reviewed in the permit process. We would be consulting with community enhancement. We would be developing the key locations for these hubs. And we would also want to focus more on incentives as opposed to penalties to really encourage folks to bring these devices back to, you know, a designated area. And you'll notice there in that picture on the bottom left that this also helps eliminate the need for parking because you have a whole bunch of bikes that fit up the space of a car in this example. And so it can also provide more room and space within a community that's already struggling with parking.
I had a quick question.
Yeah.
With the bicycle program we had, and we have experience with that program, did we have any issues with risk? We have losses where somebody got hurt, tried to sue the city or the vendor.
Defer to you.
I don't believe there was injury.
Okay.
I think this issue, the parking issue may have been,
Okay. Well, that's-
but in 2018, they didn't have that geofencing. It's a digital tool where you can remotely control the devices. And I've heard of some people, I have, the doctors are the ones you have to take back and like,
Right.
you know,
I'm thinking more of
connect.
somebody riding it, getting injured. Because I used to work at a university in risk management, and these kinds of things were a nightmare. And so, but we put good tools in place. But
Right.
still, we had some.
No, there are
exposure.
definitely
There was a
injuries.
cost to defend these claims. So I just wondered if we had that, and this is Arizona versus where I.
Do you
So,
know if there
but that
were
would be my
actually
only-
any, like,
We have.
like, I know there are injuries on the devices,
Sure, yeah.
but I don't know if there was
Just assume the risk.
I don't know if there was like a lawsuit or some
Okay.
sort of.
Because I know
anything
I
like
was in California and these things were like every risk manager's nightmare. Because it wasn't the people who subscribed. It was like if somebody comes, gets hurt, gets a hospital bill,
that.
they
Right.
don't have insurance, so they go after the scooter company and then they go after the municipality. And so anyway, I'm all for it, but I'm not going to pay the bills.
Right, but that's definitely a reason that you
Yeah,
want to
okay.
have all those, you know, liabilities
Right.
in place. But Martin, do you have anything to add?
I don't want to be that guy, but I thought.
No.
Usually I'm all for it.
Please, no, we want as much feedback as, so.
But I just thought, I was like, oh boy, these things, and I know people live in Santa Monica where they have these, and pedestrians, they hate them because people are right on the sidewalks, and they cause a lot of chaos. So,
I think there's also a lot of, education that really could help with a lot of this. You know, people just jump on like, oh yeah, you know,
sure.
am I a pedestrian? Am I a biker? I'm gonna go wherever I
Right,
want,
right.
kind of a thing. But I think that's where you really built in some education, you built in some of this geofencing. I've heard of some, our supervisor Kate was on one and she was cruising and she was entering a pedestrian heavy area and all of a sudden the device went, you know, like, and so she was like, oh, I can't go 20 miles an hour anymore. I can go, you know, 10 or whatever,
Right.
because you're in a heavily pedestrian area. Or others that have, you know, tried to just leave it, you know, in an area where it wasn't as designated parking and it's still charging you money.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah, we used to have in Davis bicycles, and it was a good experience, but it was largely up to us to be good citizens.
absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you.
I think that ties, oh, go ahead. I was just gonna say, I wasn't sure if you're gonna get to those types of topics, but that's certainly what I've seen works really well. Like I use these in DC all the time and they are governed and stop in certain areas and you can't park them. And like, those are choices, I think, I don't know, maybe you're gonna address like the types of choices that get to be made about those factors.
We're definitely going to, there's quite a bit left. But those are, I have a running list of, questions to ask these vendor companies, you know, and those are high on the list of tell me what the capability is. I mean, I've done the research, but I don't know if, does everyone use the same type of company or geofencing tool? I don't know, but those are definitely, because that's something that I personally would like to see is, you know, restrictions.
Keep them on.
On the same token, bike advisory mentioned, you know, if you're riding on the road and there's no bike lane, so, you know, you're taking over a lane, you don't want it to only go 10 miles an hour either. You know, because then you're
Right.
impeding traffic and then people get frustrated and like, there's gotta be a nice balance, I think. But again, we're just, you know, presenting, it's all up to everyone else
Right.
to decide
Well, it sounds like.
what they want to do. Yeah, I think there is some tools.
So I think that that touches on the limited staff time that could go into this, as far as hiring someone to make sure that these compliance steps and these steps to prevent injury, could be mitigated. I think that we're looking to also really pre-launch that education component as well. And getting the word out there and finding out more about what vendors have as far as a liability package or finding out more about that. Also mitigating complaints, and responding to them as soon as possible. And finding organizations like AmeriCorps members and different volunteer opportunities to have people on the ground actually getting, you know, qualitative and quantitative data that could help manage that oversight.
And one thing,
Yeah.
so the city of Austin has, they have like a micromobility chat once a week or whatever, and you can come and you can talk about it. And they have like a leaderboard, you know, as in like who's parking it well, who's riding it the most. And, you know, it's like that friendly competition thing. And so they have some really great, and you can post things and you can see where they're being ridden and it's super interactive. And I would hope that, you know, if Flagstaff decided that they could incorporate some of these really, this positive, very transparent messaging to, you know,
Just one quick follow-up question. Do you see a majority of the riders being membership? So these are people who would use it regularly to get to the bus line.
you know what, I don't know. I mean, I think
Membership. I thought.
there are memberships, or you can just use a
I've seen
per
that.
trip
Yeah,
kind
you
of
just
a,
run your credit card.
usually there's an
Yeah.
app and
Okay.
things are listed and you
Right.
just, you know, look for
Okay.
the one that's closest to you and join. I think it just depends on how often you're gonna use it, because it might be, you know, smarter financially to purchase a membership if you're gonna use it on a daily basis to and from like little errands and stuff. But if it's just an occasional trip, maybe you don't want to do a membership. I think that's just like, yeah.
So, oh, that's okay.
Can I ask you a question? I have a question about a previous slide real quick. It showed, we don't need to go back to it, but it showed declining ridership in these programs over the last few years. Do you know if that's just due to less people riding, or is it due to problems that these companies have had with different cities and cities pulling out of this program?
That I don't know. All of the peer cities we researched had, they started with a pilot and then they, kind of changed things, and then they entered into either a permit or an RFP process. And then, so they were all like positive programs. So I don't know if people were pulling out or not. I'm not really sure about that one. That's a good
I just
question.
wonder why there's less.
The growth one?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I think it declined due to COVID for a little bit, kind of making it come back.
Well, let's go back to the slide quick.
Yeah, I think that might be easier.
To me, it looked like it was just declining since like 2021.
you know what?
Yeah, the one-
So I think this is dockless. So, and so there's docked
Mhm.
and dockless. And so I think that, they were showing that, some cities were going to more of a dockless hub type of a system. And so I think that's what that is. I don't think it's necessarily usage, but it's also showing that, yeah, scooters are more prevalent than the bikes or whatever. But I think that's specifically for the docked versus not docked versus like, a whole program. Did that make sense? I don't know. But
These are systems, so the growth is slow, but not necessarily.
Like different
Type
types of.
city, the number of cities adopting these has slowed. System count. Not the usage.
Okay.
It doesn't necessarily mean a city's doing worse or better. Can't tell.
So I think a little bit we've touched on already is just public perception, and making that change is hard. We really want to continue to campaign with education, obviously, get the word out that this network would be a safe way, to get to where you need to go in the areas where we don't have a reliable transportation option. Working with Downtown Business Alliance, I feel like maybe we already went through this slide, but I did want to add that there's a little note here that the city of Austin created a database for communities to see the program in action, kind of what Kim was talking about. They have monthly chats. It looks like maybe even like a coffee chat, and they highlight the continued benefits as well as areas for improvement. And so really having that participation and that involvement creates a more robust and thriving program. And again, making sure that public perception is able to adopt like the conscious aspects of safety. I have a couple other notes on there, Kim. I don't know if you want to add. I can't quite.
Port Lorena has to read my tickets.
You could go to the next.
I think you absolutely could.
So compliance with bike ordinances, Kim was referencing earlier about the geo slowdowns, which from my understanding is like a remote control device. And so whether that be through the vendor or city staff, depending on the program model that we would adopt, you would have control, or they would have control of those devices in order to slow people down in high traffic areas. There is the one-off situation where our road network, is not a grid all the way around town, and there could be potential issues there. So I think geofencing would be something to explore, and also consider some of those nuanced risks that come with geofencing as well. Really clarifying the responsibility of like you said, like liability, different issues for incidences that could occur, really providing a robust education platform, and then clarifying the public's questions ahead of time. Also looking at overarching issues. I know we talked about it in the Bicycle Advisory Committee that our infrastructure as it is right now needs a lot of improvement. And so this program would not cause those problems. The problems with our infrastructure and traffic already exist outside of that. And so I would still say that encouraging this type of program, it would still be very valuable to mitigate that risk and to bring this program here. Devices taking over existing racks. Not too sure on, with there only being 200 in the entire town. I think that's something to consider. I think that finding the correct space for these hubs would be something we would do in the implementation process. Making sure that the company that is bringing these micromobility share devices is a viable company. I know there was some talk that a lot of these companies have gone bankrupt over the last several years. So really having a good competitive process to select the right company. Sign code restrictions. I'm assuming that that has to do with scooters specifically. I think that there are a lot of areas where people would want to be able to use these that currently right now we can't have on our sidewalks. And so we do see those weak points in infrastructure that would have to be addressed before implementing the program. And then equity and unbanked low income. I believe this would be making sure that folks can rent this without a debit card, without a credit card, that there would be places like, for example, maybe the rec centers where you could establish some sort of credit where you have a tap card and you can pay with cash. I'm sure there are a lot of creative ways, and I know with the Pure City research that this group has done, that we really want to offer that equity component so that this share program could be available to all. So, like I mentioned, cash payment options, increases social connectivity. I know, like, when you think about the industrial corridor, we do have microtransit out there, but you know, it can be difficult if you live even on 4th Street to be able to get to the different activities that are downtown or vice versa. And so this would really help increase that social connectivity for folks who don't own a car and also encourage them to participate in active transportation, furthermore, increasing the health overall of our community. This also serves areas with limited transit access, as I mentioned, the industrial corridor, and then that first mile, last mile between transit stops. And those were indicated in those orange areas when we first started our presentation. Happy to go back to these too when we open up for questions.
Can I mention, in some of the stakeholder interviews early on in the process, I went and spoke to Coconino County Health and Human Services to see if a program such as this would support or be supported by their clients. And they absolutely think it would. And they would like to see, if the city does decide to move forward, that devices be located in areas of need, such as the jail or the hospital, and you know, maybe at some transit centers, and so definitely spread around in the areas where people really might use, and these devices would be beneficial to them. And then I know that they give free bus passes, so trying to figure out a way to really support, you know, the transit and the usage and a population that may not have you know, access to a phone or something like that. So just to be super, make sure these devices are providing transportation equity to the community.
So options for micromobility share in Flagstaff.
You ready? Okay. So we just wanted to do a very high level flow chart of the options. So no, we don't want micromobility share program to come to Flagstaff. So if that's the case, then the code needs to be changed to prohibit these companies from coming. So that needs to be fixed. If yes, then there's two options from there. There is a putting out a request for proposal, and that would mean one, you know, vendors, you know, you open up the process and you vet the applicants and you go through contract and negotiations and you get city council approval and you accept one vendor and then get some sort of staffing to devote some of their time to this program. Or you go through an updated permit process and you open the permit process and let any vendors that they want come to town and bring their devices. And then you have some sort of code enforcement and customer service type of a person to manage and sort of be an intermediator between the vendor and the public. So those are kind of the two options. I don't think there's going to be 75 vendors that would come. There aren't 75 vendors, but I don't think, my thought is, there are multiple maybe, but not only one. So those are the two options. And so we have some, so this is another, just kind of, what the city would be responsible, or the operator of the devices from the vendors. And so that just kind of explains kind of responsibilities between the two. Obviously, if there's an RFP, there would be some sort of contract enforcement, customer service kind of a thing. If it's a permit process, then it's, are they following the rules of the permit and all those kinds of things. So this is where we are right now in this process. We're just engaging all of the different commissions, and we're taking feedback, and we have a slide down the way. We have some questions that we want feedback, and we want to put everything together and then return to city council and give them sort of the feedback that we received. And so then let them decide if they want to do procurement or they want to do a vendor process and then move forward from there. So we're at the very beginning of this process. These are all of there's more, but this is a big list of where we're going and who we're speaking with. And then here is where we are seeking feedback. So just some kind of questions to start the conversation. How does pedestrian advisory feel about? What are your initial reactions? Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? If, what should we consider? What steps should the city or the vendor take to make sure that we ensure equitable access to these devices if that's the way we want to come? All right, so that's it. I think we're opening it up. Oh, back to that after we do this. Okay. Any thoughts? Anything?
I'm actually really surprised Flagstaff doesn't have this already. I mean, I go to a lot of little towns, cities everywhere. As a tourist, that's the best way to see
It's
it.
an easy way to get around.
Yeah, it's cheap, it's
Cheap,
easy,
exactly.
so, yeah.
Okay, right?
Yeah, I'll say, I kind of referenced this earlier. I think it's great. I use it for work purposes quite a bit. And I think there are, it sounds like you've done all these looking at other cities, but if there are needs for how to govern or where to park, DC is a great example city to look at, because you cannot ride, they turn off when you get too close to the Capitol. Or,
Right.
yeah, so I just think that there might be some lessons learned from a place like that. Certainly not an equivalent city, but if these types of issues come up, there might be things.
Absolutely,
helpful.
absolutely. And my thought is, I want to hear, this is just me, from the different companies to see is there a difference? Are they all, how do they manage their geofencing? And yeah, I have a whole running list of questions to ask if we end up, speaking to these vendors. So there's 4 or 5 that already have expressed interest. So.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea as well. Also maybe talk to some of the communities that have had this and see what their experience has been, especially focusing on maybe some of the negative experiences. Make sure whichever vendor or vendors you select, then try to do that. Sounds like the learning curve has been pretty quick and steep. So what was happening 5 years ago, it's probably gotten a lot better, but still.
Absolutely.
But maybe benefit from that. Some city may say, like, we wish we had done this.
Well, so Chris Fair and I were on a conversation with Denver. And they told us, all things and, it's all in the PowerPoint, the lessons that we've learned and they said, definitely plan on some sort of staff person, some sort of something, whether it's to enforce a permit or to be a liaison or something like that. Like that's essential. I do know that now this is nuts, and I just learned the other day. My AmeriCorps staff is trying to get a job there, and she said that they're combining Boulder, Denver. They're kind of trying to combine all the because they're cross jurisdiction, right? And so that would make it easier, and it'd be a bigger system like DC, and so. That seemed like it would be a positive thing since they're not ditching it. So anyway.
So go to Jay online. Jay,
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
I do.
Cool. I think it's a great idea. I do, as a tourist, like using these. Just a few comments. As far as the declining use, back to that, I would imagine that it's from the ease and cost currently of buying your own scooter. And so like you can get one for $300. So I would assume like a lot of students, as you see ripping down West 66, they come into campus so they don't have to pay for parking. They buy their own scooter. So that happens everywhere. So I would imagine that's why a dip is happening on one level. I think it would be super important to be one vendor because then it's way more accountability towards that company. And then as far as customer service, having a super strong liaison for customer service where, if someone finds something that's not working, that it can be addressed rapidly. I think that the stations is a good idea in our small town because, as all of you know, we have very small sidewalks. Milton, for example, has the smallest bike lane in the world, and it's got a lot of foot traffic. So that way, they're not parked randomly, forcing people that normally walk into the already scary street. My questions and concerns along with that is battery swaps, charging. Someone gets on one, goes for a longer ride than that scooter is willing to do. What happens in that case if you didn't have a strong one vendor party that was willing to immediately address that? As you all know, you see in cities that you're a tourist, man down scooters everywhere. And for example, I can imagine the Futs over in Coconino Estates area. You get 2 scooters that are dead in there. And that's a very high traffic, very narrow trail already that then someone's just like, oh, this thing's dead. Let's just park it here. So that is a concern of mine. It's just making sure that the Futs stay clear of these things. And then we do get mud. We do have rain seasons. We have snow. What happens in those cases when one of these tires gets mudded up? Back to geo blocking. Obviously, when you had spin, there were videos of those going up Humphreys. So really lock that down so they don't end up in random places. And then, just my other concern is you see how people treat these in big cities as well and what, how that looks. I'm currently down in Phoenix, and every 10 feet there is one in the canal path. In the canal itself, drowned. So how that, getting those out in that kind of case, if they are in the woods, who's doing that? So I think having a one vendor that is extremely responsible is probably the most crucial part of this. So.
That's really great. Thank you so much, Jay.
There's a comment from Sean in the chat. Sean, do you want to hop in or I can read it for you if you like?
I can hop in. I think this would be a great thing. I think there are a lot of things that Jay touched on that I 100% agree with. And then I also feel like that we have a lot of issues with people already not knowing how to use these things or how to ride them and follow the rules. And the rules are different on the campus than they are in the city. So we're going to have to be really mindful and thoughtful about signage and how to educate where they can ride, where they cannot ride. Yes, you're a bike. You need to stay in the bike lane. No, you're a pedestrian. You need to be on the sidewalk, or you're a car. You need to be in the road. You can't switch between the two or three. And then the helmets, I think, would be important. We, in the ER, we see a lot of injuries from these things, a lot. So that's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Sean.
Yeah, great feedback. Thank you.
One thing I would add is like questions to ask the vendor when I've seen different strategies from different ones that I've used, but sometimes you have to click through a set of agreements or, rules and agree to them when you take the app and you scan the QR code or whatever it is. It's like, okay, you're renting this, here are the rules, you're in Flagstaff, within reason, a relatively short process. But these are things I think that the vendor could provide to chip it away at some of the education component of it. At least it's like you can't get to the rental and pay for it, get it moving until you've clicked through all these screens. Even if you ignore them, I mean, there's that, but at least it's something.
I 100% agree. And I'm interested in what kind of education these companies, yeah. Is it, you have to go through a training first? You have to, probably not, but yeah, I would like to see some kind of education to try to limit craziness. I mean, as you know, people are crazy drivers too.
I've not seen a training, but it can take a couple of minutes to get through the different screens. And you have to scroll through to the bottom to be able to click to the next screen. And I don't know. So there's ways you can enforce some attention.
Is there any data on, I have my suspicions, but the 75%, 25 split, any increasing percentage of scooter use compared to bikes? I mean, I imagine it's because it's even easier than a bike and it does look like more fun. Is there any, in the research, is there any reasoning for that split and that growth?
I think a lot of people like to ride their own bikes. I think that's one of the factors.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's super easy. It's something that some people don't have personal devices and if you're in heels and a skirt, you can jump on a scooter but I haven't seen any research. I just know that it's like a 75, 25. So I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that if, yes, we say yes, it's going to be a lot of e-scooters. I just want to make sure that everything is super transparent.
That's actually my next question. I know on the flow chart box, the second box was develop a recommendation to bring to council. Like at what point, where does it factor in, or where is the determination, the recommendation going to be made for, all right, bikes, you're out, it's scooters? What criteria are going to go into making that decision? Because that seems to be, other than, and I agree with Jay on one vendor, so it's probably better. I think this is the other big division is scooters and bikes, or scooters or bikes. And what criteria you can use to make that recommendation?
I think it would need to be an and. I don't think an or is an even possibility.
Why is that?
Just because I think some people really do want an e-bike. It's just that I think the most people use the scooters, but I think there needs to be e-bikes available and maybe some adaptive devices for those who may not I think Veo has a sit-on scooter, right? So it is a scooter, or maybe a trike or some kind of device. But I think for us to be equitable, we need to have everything that's available to, at least that's my thought.
And I think
I'm not running this though.
Chris mentioned how much safer it is to be on the foots in general too, and a lot of that might not be scooter friendly.
Yeah,
So I think Kim calls them acoustic bikes would also be part of the share as well, correct? That aren't necessarily all
I don't know about that.
electric,
That I
just
don't
because you
know.
want as many options to get where you need to go as possible, so.
Probably not.
Diversify.
You can check with the vendors. I bet they don't too many acoustic.
I don't,
I was just going, it seems like the, for.
I think it's mostly electric.
In the range of 200 devices, which seems to be the number, the figure for cities of our size. Like then if you're parsing it out, 75% of those are, and then it seems like covering areas with the right device, in the right place is gonna be a particular challenge.
Definitely to get more places with the bike here. Say.
But I think, I don't know if these devices have really good capability for a foot that isn't paved. But I don't know that.
So two things, last week, Bike Advisory did kind of wrestle with the issue of the split. Like they clearly wanted to see the programming mix. So they also recognize that vendor needs to be viable. So you don't want to force too many restrictions on them. You need to have some guarantees. Also on the issue of scooters on foot trails, half our mileage of foot trails is aggregate. There's a variety of surfaces out there. Some of the unaggregate surfaces are fairly hard. Some are, a little bit softer and looser. Way back when we adjusted the city codes to address e-bikes and scooters, a lot of the conversation was around e-bikes rather than scooters. Some concern that scooters weren't, usable on aggregate trails. And so as a result, if you look at the table where things are allowed, e-scooters are not allowed on aggregate trails. And that's probably worth checking in with the vendor to see.
Yeah.
Is it different now? Do we have knobby tire? And I think our scooters more off-road capable. Right? Maybe we think about how our current code works.
Some of the bike shops I know are doing, I think, fairly well renting e-bikes. Does anybody rent scooters in town? I've never heard of it.
I think doesn't that one company on Birch do
Yeah.
e-scooters
Yeah.
too?
Do they?
I've seen Segway still. I thought Segway was out of business, but maybe they just have,
They might have tours.
maybe
Still
they're
do the
tours and they're old, like older devices. I don't think you can buy like a new Segway, not that I have the money to do that, but anyway.
Segway's gotten into, you can look it up, into these things that they kind of promote as e-bikes, but they're like little mini motorcycles. They go much faster than bikes, yeah. They're made by Segway.
But yeah, looking into where they can be ridden to make sure that, the rules are clear and everyone knows, and that can be part of the education, sidewalks, know this, know that. And so by them clicking through, maybe they accept some responsibility for their actions.
And maybe looking at vendors that have, the service areas with similar topography. Sounds like, Colorado, Denver, places that, do have a mix of aggregate and trail networks.
And with weather. Oh, Sean has another question, but with weather, when there's a really big storm, so they have them year round. And they don't, some places collect them all. And then put them out, kind of a thing. But in Denver, if there's a storm coming or the roads haven't been cleared, you can't ride them, they turn them off with the geofencing. And then, when they're able to be ridden, they turn back on again, so.
Sean?
Yeah, to Jay's point earlier about, worrying about batteries and scooters on the futs and just sort of abandoned scooters, I would say if we're going to diversify what we're going to offer to tourists or to people that are wanting to rent these, then perhaps we should just say, okay, scooters stay on paved roads or trails or sidewalks. But if you want to go off road, you need the e-bike. And then I think we can justify having both options easier. And it also, I think, is safer and probably is going to be a lot less clutter and weirdness on the futs.
refresh my memory on e-bike policy on foots?
Yes, I can. Class 1 and 2 e-bikes are allowed on all foots, except for the Arizona Trail and the loop around Buffalo Park. Class 3 e-bikes are not allowed on foots trails. The difference being that Class 1 and 2 go up to 20 miles per hour. Class 1 is pedal assist, Class 2 is throttle and or pedal assist. Class 3 goes up to 28 miles per hour and is only pedal assist. Did you ask about scooters also?
But since you brought it up, what's our scooter policy after this?
Might have to look, but I think it's on, they're not allowed on sidewalks. This is e-scooters only. They're not allowed on sidewalks or on unpaved foot trails.
But there's obviously no enforcement of that. I see scooters on sidewalks and foots all the
No e-bikes on
Not any
Forest
what now?
Service trails either.
time.
As a council member, I don't have a vote tonight, but I do want to, I am interested in what Mountain Line is going to say about every bus stop having these scooters left at the bus stop when the person gets on the bus. It seems to me nobody's going to want to try to take their e-scooter, rented e-scooter on the front of the bus. So I think if we go into implementation, we're going to have to figure out how to manage 2, 3, 5 scooters at almost every bus stop.
I would think that the geofencing would have to come into play at that point too. And that is something I thought about and brought up to this group, some internal meetings that, that wouldn't be conducive for equal access if there were a lot of scooters at the bus stops, and what would we do with that? So I think that those spaces would have to be potentially strategically organized within proximity, but not right at the bus stop.
And the geofencing is sophisticated enough that could be implemented.
I believe so.
I believe it is.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know for
Because it
sure,
would
but
recognize each location,
yeah,
each stop.
I mean, I think trying to park it in a place where you can't, it just keeps charging you. Like, you learn that once, and then that solves that problem, right?
So I've seen in some towns where people make money by picking up scooters that need to be moved from one place to another and or charged.
Yeah.
And so it creates this whole little side hustle that people can do to pick up a scooter from like a bus stop, and it needs to be moved and charged and taken somewhere else. And that's generally how I think these companies do that.
Okay.
Yeah, how you like plug it in your garage,
Yeah,
put it up the next day, and you get paid for it.
make a few bucks doing that.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think there's a trade-off to be had, right, between, like you were saying, at certain locations, you can't end the ride unless you're at a appropriate parking location, and so it keeps charging you. But then that can be somewhat prohibitive for people, like if they're all that way, then you can only use it to get to places where there's parking.
right.
And so I don't know what kind of GIS exercise it would be to set up a geofence where sometimes that's the case and sometimes that's not the case. I mean, I feel like that's a vendor question, right?
Yeah, and I was curious, would a dockless and dock system be something that would be better? Like you have a dock, like a hub, in a super, downtown, I don't know, just throwing out there. But then in other areas, maybe that's where you have a dockless. I'm not sure. It's on my list of questions to ask. I've got a long list.
On the, I think it was the second slide, it was the map of the city and had the brown areas where you said folks have been looking for more transit service, and it seemed like that was areas that you thought this would work. Has there been any discussion like what the geographic area for this program would be?
I mean,
Like, would it be
I'll
city, entirety of city limits?
Yes.
Push it beyond?
well, it would, and I imagine they would probably go into the county, they would go on NAU, they would cross jurisdictions, I believe, yes. So, and I would assume that the vendor would have responsibility to bring those back. You know what I mean? If
Yeah.
someone rode it to, Smoke Rise, and I don't know, some of them I think are collected at the end of the day and charged, or some, I don't know, they're all different, but I think there needs to be a vendor responsibility on redistributing them into places where they need, where there needs to be 10% of the devices in these specific areas, you know what I mean? So, and maybe that's a side hustle, right? I don't know.
I don't know what happens in other communities, but that could potentially be a geofencing exercise too. Vendor doesn't want to pick up the occasional stray scooter from Belmont or Downey Park. Geofence in the city limits, so they could be used outside city limits. Do they need to be? Is that beneficial? And how much of a benefit is provided by letting somebody in Downey Park versus the obligation of the vendor to collect those scooters if left there?
Yeah.
I had a question about transit. Are scooters, could you take the scooter on the bus?
I asked that question too, and I think that'd be something that we would have to discuss, in service planning and, move it up to leadership and find out an exact answer for that. I think some of this equipment would be, quite frankly, a bit heavy.
I don't think it's like your personal devices, those, you can fold up and
Yeah,
travel. I don't think I feel like these are more heavy.
yeah, I would say scooters would not be able to be on the bus, like just thinking through that and where, they would be secured within the bus. Yeah, it's not like everyone at FUSD who has their personal scooter that they can just lift up and bring in there that isn't.
So now they fold.
They fold up.
And I think the point is to and from, right? To, then you take transit where you want to go. And then in theory, there would be a different device for you to continue on. I mean, that's in my brain.
But inevitably, someone will try to bring their scooter onto the bus, so I think that that's definitely something to look into in the implementation process. And I don't know if we could geofence our buses. Or it would just be that, we would provide signage wherever those were parked from that first mile, last mile connection. Strictly said that there are no scooters allowed on the bus. And I know some bikes don't fit on the bike racks too, and they're also very heavy to lift. I've tried to put my e-bike on the bus and it's backbreaking, so.
It might be a question for like Tempe, has buses and streetcar and the light rail. It's what the policies are.
Yeah.
In places like that.
Yeah. Got that down.
Yay.
Tying in with all the geofencing and stuff, back to the single vendor thing, I would imagine, like just thinking about this as a project, the first month or two is just going to be insanity, figuring out where people are actually using these. That first mile, last mile of like, oh, someone abandoned this here at this bus stop. This other person picked it up and rode all the way out to Doney Park. And now we've got this one way out there. And so all the data is going to come in. But again, just like making sure that whatever the city chooses, they get the best vendor possible. So people form this complaint, they find all these things buried in mud or way out in Doney Park, that it isn't like 6 months on your own. Like you have these 300 scooters of trash now that free for all, we're going to let it be. Just whatever the city does, I think it's a great idea. Like as a tourist or a bar hopper or a college student, it makes a lot of sense. So making it happen, but having the ability to really work with that vendor and the vendor is on it. And that's, I guess, my only concern is there's going to be an insanity part, like the way that I'm thinking about it, but just making sure we pick someone that's on it.
So question about like the potential difference between a vendor that we would choose today and a program that we'd have today and like the spin pilot, for example. So the spin bikes had no technology whatsoever attached to them. There was, they're not geofenced.
You go back to
They're worth about $45 each. And so there was absolutely no incentive not to take them up Humphreys, move them in the Rio, whatever. What are the, I imagine the safeguards now with vendors are different because these scooters are more valuable. Is there more accountability on the part of clients or renters to the company in terms of where they're taken, where they're left? that sort of thing? Are the vendors more observant, diligent about kind of tracking what happens to their stock?
I mean, I would assume so, but having, and this is part of company viability, right? If something happens to the company and they go bankrupt, is the city, like, there needs to be some safeguards for the city to be protected, whether it's money built in so that we can collect all of them, or some way to protect the city from these devices being dumped everywhere and not used or whatever. And so I think, again, I don't know, I think it's a business model of the company, and we'd have to, put it on the list of questions to ask and really, determine, because we don't want that, right? And responsiveness, to Jay's point, the company needs to be responsive to the needs of the community. And, yeah, the first month or two is going to be crazy. So it needs to be like hyper responsive. And then I think once the dust settles and, but I don't know, that's just my brain of how it would look.
I'm thinking of a case of somebody, threw a scooter into, that they rented, like that's where they left it. Can they come back after them?
It's usually people that get
I think
parked and someone else
what
comes and
built
explains it.
in is the user liability. And if they are geofenced, they'll know who did it, or who was the last person that used it, I would imagine.
I mean, it's just general vandalism. Usually it's people park the scooter and then someone else, because when I lived in Portland, the bikes were in the Willamette all the time. And I don't think people were paying to do it. I think it was just they were there and in the way, and they went over the side.
So yeah, if we can limit,
Yeah.
have them put in a decent place so it doesn't annoy people and vandalize. I don't know.
Some people are vandalized. So
That's because they can, right? Thank you, everyone. I feel bad we took so much time. I really tried to be fast.
Is there any other questions or comments? Any questions, Anne, Lorena, Jamie, that we didn't ask or answer, or? Any additional helpful from
Methodology.
Oh, yes. So two things. One, there is a survey. Jamie's working on a survey for the community. That will be posted on Connect Flagstaff. We're working on that right now because I've learned developing a really good survey takes time. So we want to make sure that, you just can't throw it out there.
He's like, yes.
And then just as a general, which way are we leaning? So are we at?
How about we do a straw poll from going back to your flow chart? Yep. So no, yes or no, and then if yes, permit or single vendor.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody for no? Okay, we're on the yes path. How do we feel about the RFP with one vendor and a contract and all that kind of jazz? Raise your hands and put a hand up on the screen.
Jay advocated for this earlier, so.
Yeah, I think Sean did too. So, okay, so I think that's pretty much.
Is that all seven?
Yeah.
Ask the other one.
Okay,
Yes.
is anyone open to multiple vendors? And yeah. You have to be
I'll
really-
say I'm not opposed to
Yeah.
it. I think there's a lot of information that might be useful to know about. It's not like something I'm.
So I agree with Melanie, but I'm just having trouble thinking that the scale of a program in Flagstaff would support two vendors. So
Right.
like splitting the limited profits associated with this, splitting it in two and making it less feasible.
Well, and doesn't Santa Monica have
You don't have
one
to raise your
vendor?
hand.
One vendor for e-bikes and a couple vendors for scooters? They've got multiple vendors, and I feel like some of them are specifically for e-bikes, some are for, I think that there's potential
So
for,
would that be RFP one vendor only for each?
no, that's what I
device,
don't
or
know,
would it be both?
that's what I'm asking. I'm not 100% sure if all these companies have both devices or if there's some that only have scooters.
So, sorry, with this flow chart, does it have to go that way? Could it be RFP? And multiple, like, do you have to make this distinction? We can only have one vendor from an RFP, or could you look at the responses to the RFP and potentially, based on what they say, potentially explore multiple vendors? Like, does it have to go in that
Like that,
order?
especially if somebody's exclusively scooters.
That's really good.
I've read it as the difference is, do we put in code, this is the procedure for a permit? And it could be 1 or 10 vendors or the RFP. And I guess we would have to decide if we would accept 1 or more. But the question is more of, do we seek out the RFP or do we put it in the code and let them come to us? Versus 1 versus multiple.
Like that.
Like
It's a
Tucson
total different.
has a 12-page permit process. And they're super specific. So the vendors that come in, they have to get, business and license and then they have to get the permit and follow the guidelines of the permit. So, or, someone going through opening the contract, getting city council approval. I think that would probably most likely be 1, but I'm not sure. This is where we're getting the feedback. So if that's the feedback, we'll take it back. I don't have a say either way. I'm just giving information.
I think what I was getting at is, can you write the RFP in such a way that if you got 5 applicants and applicant A fits these needs really well and applicant B fits these really well, you can potentially bring both on. I don't know if you can write the RFP that way. I have no idea how it works within the city, but
No permit, but 2 separate.
It would be 2 separate contracts, right? We'll bring that feedback back. Absolutely. I mean, right? Everything's on the table right now. There's nothing. Yeah, because we want it to be the right thing. If we do bring it, it needs to fit our community the way we want it to fit. So absolutely.
So for the committee, if I wrote that there were no votes, so nobody was not in favor. And in terms of the yes votes, a vendor RFP, single vendor RFP process versus permit, there were questions but not consensus.
Okay, yeah,
So
that's great. Yeah, absolutely.
sorry.
thanks.
I think you're done.
These questions.
And I know Dave's here, so I want to make sure he is able to present. You're not?
I don't think I.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were. I apologize.
Great. Well, thanks for coming out. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate great conversation and I really appreciate all the feedback. Truly.
Oh, great.
We have a couple of items of old business that probably don't need to take a huge amount of
Oh,
time.
I need to stop sharing.
Great, thank you. I'll start with the pedestrian and bicycle crash data report, which we spent quite a bit of time on last time.
Yeah, we've done a little bit of work since last time. I just wanted to give you a list of the things that we're kind of have targeted for the moment. Of diving into in more detail. So one, of course, would be where we have segments and intersections where there are high injuries for both pedestrians and bicyclists. Various grant programs for safety focus in on just high injury crashes. We'll see what that looks like. We did a little bit of work. It becomes a little bit challenging because we really limit the number of crashes. I guess that's not really unfortunate. There are few high injury and fatal head and bike crashes, fortunately. So it's kind of difficult to tell geographic patterns always. We're looking at where nighttime crashes occur for pedestrians, for bicyclists, is there a geographic component to the rise of crashes during August, September, and October? You'll recall that there's a significant percentage of pedestrian crashes that have alcohol involvement. We're going to look at where that is geographically. Left turn crashes for pedestrians and right turn crashes for bicyclists. Again, we're trying to isolate if there are particular spots, intersections where those problems are prevalent. We looked at, I think it might have been this group that was looking at, we look at the zip code of drivers involved in crashes. We cannot, that data isn't recorded generally. We can look at the state of registration, but I'm not sure how much that tells us. Because we don't know that if they're local coming from other parts of the state. And that generally we're kind of refining information we're collecting on segments and intersections to get a better handle. If a particular location has a lot of crashes, what's the nature of those crashes? Are they high injury, or is a particular type of crash? Is there a particular movement that's being made, like, cars turning left from southbound to westbound, for example? So stay tuned. We're still looking into it. We'll have that at upcoming PAC meetings.
Moving on to the trip diary survey since it's already on the screen.
Yeah, do you, I know you, we'll make you present. If you have anything
Yeah, just to give you a little bit of background, we've been doing this every 6 years for many years. This year we upped the number of surveys that went out because it was one of many surveys during a political season. Response wasn't great. And we supplemented it with using the city's registered community forum registration. And pleased to say that the demographics, including participation by mode of that set of surveys compared to the random sample surveys, compared very well. So have fairly high confidence in the returns. And then some pretty striking changes in mode share, and seeking to understand those a little bit better. But part of it is upticks in bike and ped. Part of it is we started asking questions about recreation use. And we also, this was entirely online this time. These were not paper surveys. So it was available on mobile apps, which we suspect makes the recording of walk and bike trips much easier. So we're investigating that a little bit further. And need to understand, percentages versus absolute numbers and see what we see changes. So still doing analysis. And be happy to present a more detailed assessment in the future. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. A couple of points to, I made a couple of slides with highlights. The survey, this is what mode share in Flagstaff looked like for the survey. So you can see the gray is vehicle use. This is by number of trips. So trips people make, 57.5% for vehicle, 4.3 for transit, 7.9 for bicycle, and 26.4. So 26.4% of trips in Flagstaff are made by walking. That's helpful. Here are the trends. Dave mentioned we've done the survey before, back to 2006. Again, look at the increase in walking trips, and again, that may be somewhat related to how the survey was conducted and capturing small, short walking trips. You can see transit in red. With BAC, we need to talk about bike trips. It's a long time. We haven't, it's really kind of stayed flat. If you look at the surveys done by area, so we divide the city into the core area, which is downtown, NAU, the hospital, parts of Woodlands Village, the rest of Flagstaff, and the rest of the region. You can see how bike, ped, transit, mode share increases in the core area and drops when you get to the rest of the region. And then this is a little bit confusing, but this is mode share change by area between 2006 and 2024. And in the core, what that's telling us is that walk mode share increased 26.6%. There's a 26.6% change from 2006 to 2024. Transit also went up, biking went down slightly. In the rest of Flagstaff, walking increased slightly. Ped and bike, bike and transit both went down. So there's, if you're in the core area, there's a whole different story related to mode share and what's happening at the time versus if you're in the rest of Flagstaff. And we can look on, 2006 was a while ago. We can look to see how the changes were kind of play out more recently. That's really all I had for that. We've done a report in the past that takes both information from the trip diary survey as well as commuting patterns from the American Community Survey, part of the census, and pulled it together into kind of a comprehensive report to give us a better picture of how people are traveling and how they're getting around, especially by walking, biking, and transit. So we'll work on that. We may have that for the next meeting or a meeting after. We can also continue to look at the trip diary survey. Dave indicated he's willing to come back to go through it in more detail, but we can pull out more relevant data points. That's by relevant, interesting data points from that to see, just to get a better idea how people get around.
Is Fourth Street included at all in the core? Is Fourth Street, rest of Flag or core?
Rest of Flag.
The core is basically downtown NAU, Milton to Lone Tree. And I think we actually go all the way up to, all the way up to Forest.
Next item, urban trails bikeways map. Is there an update to that from last time?
There's not an update. We
Clicked on
did it work?
it. It didn't show my location,
Okay.
so I wasn't sure. I was like, maybe it was the screen capture.
Maybe the next meeting or two, but we got good information about the PAC and BAC about what else could be. So we'll try to incorporate those things. Right before BAC, I went to open nothing came.
I got to open it, and it had great detail, but I tried to see my location.
You didn't do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that may have been me. I mean, I'm just a heck with.
wonder if this is an appropriate time for me to raise this question, but I would like to see uniformity on our bicycle and pedestrian pathways. For instance, along Route 66, that nice 10-foot wide cement trail pathway all the way from Fanning up to downtown. It's got an occasional yellow stripe or orange stripe in the center of the 10-foot wide, but no designation for bicycles to keep to the street side, pedestrians to keep to the off-street side. But NAU oftentimes, I think, makes that separation of bicycles from pedestrians. And in the presentations of J. Wesley Powell street design for Butler street safety, those diagrams show a separated path for bicycles going both ways, and then separate from pedestrians that are walking side by side. So is it possible to get uniformity in our greater community, uniformity between NAU, city, and county on separating pedestrians from bicycles?
Rhetorical, do you want?
I'm just
Throwing
raising
it out there.
I'm just raising it as something that I think would be an improvement.
Yeah.
Because when on Route 66, people stroll along kind of in the middle of the path. Maybe they keep to the right, but oftentimes they're in the middle of the path, and bicyclist appropriately slows down, says on your left or on your right, but greater uniformity citywide, I think would be helpful.
Yeah, I think that how it actually gets used is going to depend on the facility, because I think that foot trails are always going to be two-way traffic mixed between bikes and peds. So the newer bike lanes that we're building are directional bike lanes adjacent to a sidewalk. So there's really a side for bicyclists and a side for pedestrians. I think along Lone Tree, maybe somewhat unique, we may not replicate that in other places in the near term, but it will be like a two-way bikeway and a pedestrian facility that's separate from it altogether. So 16 feet total of. And for the things that we're building, we have the ability to sign and pavement mark those to make it clear how we expect them to be used. The foots are, we have a lot of existing ones, and I think that we need to do that, especially on Route 66, because those things do give us problems. We can do better with that, with how they're marked and signed to make it clear how people want to use them. And maybe, there's 66 and Fort Valley in it, and a handful of them. Maybe it's not as big a task as I'm envisioning to make sure that they're marked and signed.
Thank you.
I tend to agree. I take the 66 path, and I think having some guidance for how people ought to use it would be helpful. I think anytime that users are kind of spread out, everything works. We can get around pedestrians, bicyclists can manage. When things get more crowded, then you really need to pay attention to how people are using it to make sure that it remains safe. And our goal is to make them more crowded. We want people to use them. Yeah.
Crowded and safe.
Crowded and safe, yes. Thank you for your comments.
Okay, concluding general business, can run through these pretty quick. PAC appointment and reappointments, also known as Jody's never allowed to leave us.
Did you take a photo of that?
Let's we've been talking about this one forever. What's the status? Martin, what do you need from us?
Nothing at the moment. Stay tuned. We do have a handful of applications.
Jody, you see you're gonna have to hop off in just a minute. Thanks for joining us. Pet bike projects, 5-year capital plan.
City Council had their capital budget retreat today, and we made a presentation on a handful of both transportation projects and specific pet bike projects. I can give you a more thorough update next time. We made some progress on the unit. What's your preference? You would see it now? Oh, you can show you a little bit now.
Yeah.
At least we can show you the slides.
Mine's not like 62.
No, that was micromobility.
I'll just-
Yeah.
It's 112.
You're right, that's not 62.
Okay. Bye-bye, too.
Don't care, we don't care. Other things, we don't care, we don't care. So here's some of the transportation ones. Lone Tree Overpass, Butler Fourth, Smoke Rise, that's,
What's the schedule for Snowgrass?
design, construction, 2025.
I'll believe it when I see it.
Butler Avenue Complete Street, Country Club Oakmont intersection, Plaza Vieja traffic counting, Schweitzer Canyon Foots, what's going out for bid. Foots asphalt repair, construction summer of 2025. Linda Vista sidewalk under construction. You can see the before and after. Woods Trail Mountain View access. So what's in blue is being constructed as that 16-foot thing that I talked about. That's part bikeway, two-way bikeway, part sidewalk. And we're working with Peak, the engineering firm, to do concept plans for the purple part. So at the south end, we connect to campus and down to the Sinclair Wash Trail. At the north end, Where Lone Tree Overpass comes up, they'll provide a signalized intersection, and our trail can line up to go directly across and connect to the Schweitzer Canyon Trail, which we just looked at as being bid. The only minor catch is there's about 23, 25 feet of difference in the two, but we're ready to take a look at how we might do that. Right, switch back. And then imagine the connectivity, like for somebody in the Route 66 trail, if you get to Lone Tree, you take that trail down and go right into campus. And campus or down to Sinclair Wash. If you're going north and can get up that escarpment in some manner, Schweitzer Canyon Trail will take you all the way to Buffalo Park. So both things really help. Foots, Sinclair Ridge, this is De Miguel School. Solid orange line is a trail that was built as part of this subdivision. We're trying to connect it over to the school. We reached out to FUSD. We have a meeting set up with the principal, the superintendent, and the facilities person to kind of look at how this all works. We need an easement from FUSD as well, so we'll talk about that.
No estimated date yet, like for completion on that.
Yeah, kind of some of these projects were sort of this is like pre-design. So until they become full-on capital projects, we don't necessarily have a schedule. You can see though that we have like money for design in this year's budget and then money for construction in next year's budget. So if we can push it forward, we'll have money for construction. Foot Trail Sawmill. This is kind of the sawmill area. This is police station, sheriff substation. This is Alara student housing. They built this trail partially down the hill. We want to take it down to Sinclair Wash Trail. And all of this is city property. We need 2 easements here. There's some grade. It's a pretty good descent to get down to that point. So we're looking at how to manage those grades.
There's already like a footpath. I mean,
Yeah, there is. Yeah. Actually, I think over on here, there's some kind of full-on BMX.
yeah, there is. Yeah.
I don't know how many you think are in town. A dozen secret BMX tracks. But again, we have at least the ones we know. We have budget this year to start design, construction dollars coming next year. Single track forest access, what's shown in dark red is places where we want to build single track trails connected from the city system out to the forest. We haven't made much progress on this, but we have engaged pros to see if they can help us deliver some of these trails. We have been working on easement acquisition as well. Crossing Humphreys and Fine. This is Flagstaff High. This street is Humphreys. Humphreys is busier than the other neighborhood streets in that area. When FUSD kind of cut back on student transportation with the buses, a lot more students are using Mountain Line. Mountain Line leaves them off on Beaver going southbound in San Francisco. So they have to walk over to Flag High and cross Humphreys in the process. We're getting a lot of comments, feedback from parents, the school district, Mountain Line about is there a way to get kids across Humphreys safer? Fine is kind of the location that could be at Hunt as well. We'll look at which kind of works better. Humphreys is an ADOT roadway, so we need to go through the ADOT process to have this crossing installed. We also have to collect a bunch of data for them to prove that kind of the crossing works, basically. Carlton has collected a lot of that data, done a great job. We're close. And we think the crossing would be potentially an island, crossing island. And then a amber flashing beacon or a red flashing beacon. That kind of is what they typically use the red flashing ones, but I think they may be open to amber flashing. So again, we have money in this year's budget for design work and then construction money in next year's budget. I think this is the last one on ped bike. This is first mile, last mile. This is actually a grant that Mountain Line wrote and was given. It's bikeways, sidewalks, and crossings to support transit. This is kind of what we're reviewing now. Right now, we're at 90% plans. We're working on constructing these sidewalks here in Purple on Huntington this construction season. Just anecdotally, we went up a month or so ago to meet with a food bank and shelter services, just to find out, what patterns of usage they see, what issues they see. Can we do anything in the project to help if they see it? And I was floored by how much pedestrian activities there is. There's a lot of people that use that. And it's very much complicated because Huntington is a heavy duty industrial street. There are like trucks on it. So the compatibility of having pedestrians without proper sidewalks and lots of trucks is just kind of concerning, and convinced me absolutely that we needed to pursue this project. So we kind of moved it up to the top and do it. Like I said, this summer is the first in this series of projects. The other ones will follow in either next year or the year after. I think we have a schedule on over 3 years. And we'll just point out the orange circles are crossings. Our most important one is here at Forest and Fort Valley. We regularly hear comments from the public. I think we've probably talked about this. And I don't know if you want to see the other, here's beautification. I know nothing. That's the rest of the 112.
Great. Thank you. Reading off the slide up there. Safe Streets for All.
Safe Streets for All, Butler Avenue, Capitol is working on an RSLQ, request for statements of qualifications, which they hope to release fairly quickly to get a designer on board for the project. So that's moving forward. Safe Streets Master Plan, we continue to meet internally, developing a scope. At some point here, hopefully in the next couple of months, we'll go out for a similar RSLQ for a consultant. I'm going to give an update on the last one, which is Safe Routes to School.
Safe Routes to School, we had our first continuous bi-weekly meetings kicked off. I uploaded every full count, if it was remotely close to the schools we're looking at. Gave them a ton of homework to do, because that's where it's at, collecting background data.
That's it.
That's it.
I feel like I should apologize because I think we cover some of these things in previous meetings. And I know we do, and I forget entirely what we told you last month.
So did we, so you can just.
All right, perfect. Then it works out.
That's great it's great to hear whatever update you guys have on those.
For the third time we hear, oh, I remember that.
Last month feels like a year ago.
It really does. That closes out the agenda, and we will adjourn at 18:10. Thanks, everybody.
You.
It's